So it wasn't, I graduated from college and ended up teaching and coaching locally for 2 years, and then I moved on to Corpus Christi. And it was there in Corpus Christi. It's interesting because Corpus Christi means the body of Christ. And so I ended up, and I didn't even know that for many years while I was living there. But as I was living there, I started to acquire everything that I thought was going to make me happy. I bought a house, I bought a car, I had a pop-up camper, mini bikes, I bought a boat. And I remember sitting on my deck one evening with a friend, and she was Christian. She wasn't Catholic, but she was a Christian. And I said to her, there's something missing in my life, and I really don't know what it is. There's this like hole, and there's nothing that I've been able to do that has actually filled that hole. And she looked at me like puzzled, and she said, Joni, you don't know what that is? And I said, no, do you? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, are you gonna tell me? And she said, well, I don't want you to get mad at me. And so we argued about this for 20, 30 minutes. And I said, look, just tell me. And I said, I promised her I wouldn't get upset. And so then we're sitting there. She's like, all right, I'm going to tell you. She said, it's God. God's missing from your life. And I was like, you're right. I'm mad at you now. I was like, and then I kind of opened up to her. I said, I grew up listening to my grandmother pray or watching grandma pray, and I've been to church and I don't understand what's happening. And I even have a Bible that sits on my dresser that someone gave me. It's got my name on it, and I try to read it and I don't understand it. And I said, so if this God of yours is so powerful and really wants everybody to know about him, then why doesn't he make it easy for people to get to know him? And she said, well, I don't have all the answers, she said, but if you ever are really serious and you want to just get down on your knees and say to God everything that you've already said to me, she said, I think that you'll get answers. And I said, oh, come on, let's go. And I remember going off that day and we went and bought 2 kayaks, because it was every time that I had that empty feeling, it was always buying something or going on a vacation, or spending money. And so we went and bought 2 kayaks. We kayaked and had a great weekend, and that hole was filled during that time, and it always was. So then I remember the weekend was over. It was Sunday, and I was laying in my bed, and the sun was coming in, shining in, and I remember watching the ceiling fan turn and feeling that empty feeling, like I just had this amazing weekend with my friends, riding these kayaks and playing in the water, and now here's this hole again. And so I remember I rolled off my bed and I got down on my knees and I prayed, and I can't really remember what all I said, but I think it was something along the lines like, I don't understand you. I've tried to read the Bible and I don't understand it, and so why do you make it so hard for people to get to know you if you really are serious about people following you? And I made a promise that whatever God brought my way, I'm getting a little emotional here, that I would say yes. And I remember Elvia's voice saying, be ready for what comes if you say this, Joni. Like, don't just say it and blow it into the wind. So I remember I had my eyes closed and I was praying and really wanted to get to know this God that everybody talked about. And I opened my eyes and I was waiting for something to happen. Like, I really believed that God was going to show up and say, Joni, here I am. And so nothing happened. I heard the ceiling fan. I looked at the ceiling fan and I just kind of looked around, and I thought, just as I thought, like nothing happened, and same old. And so I remember I got up and invited some friends over, and we had a big old barbecue at the house. But then a few days later, that's when it started to get really interesting. I received a package in the mail, and it was from a girl that I had coached, because I'd been coaching now for about 10 or 15 years. And her mother had sent me a package. And so I opened up this package, and it was this new American Version Bible. and it's written in like plain English. And so in the Bible, there was a note that she wrote, and she said, every morning I wake up and I pray, and it's during that time that God gives me assignments or things that He wants me to do. And this morning, it was very clear that God wanted me to send this Bible to you. And she said, if it doesn't mean anything to you, feel free to send it back. And if you do understand, this message, then, good luck, and know that I'm praying for you. And I remember sitting there just stunned, like, wow, like, is this the answer to my prayer? Like, is this real? Like, there's no way that she would have known that I even had that prayer, because I didn't want to tell anybody about it, and I didn't tell anybody about it. So anyway, I started reading it, and I kind of understood the language. And then a couple weeks later, I remember there was a knock on the door, and there were two Mormon guys, and they wanted to come talk to me about Joseph Smith. And so I was like, well, I said that I'd say yes, so sure, come on in. So they were coming to my house like every Thursday for a meal and fellowship. And then like another month or two later, like the Jehovah's Witnesses came to my door. And so I'm like, well, I said I would say yes, so sure, come on in. So then they started talking to me about Jehovah, and then I remember I went to some Christian churches. I went to this new fellowship church, Bay Area Fellowship, and I really liked it there. People were really welcoming and friendly, and the music was amazing. They had these huge screens, and they had this amazing band, and it was all on, worshiping God. And so I really liked going there. But I remember then it was my birthday, and I was going out of town, and I asked the preacher, I said, well, I'm leaving town, so is there somewhere else that I can go while I'm gone? And he said, no. He said, this is just here, like you would just find another church, but there's like not an affiliation at the time. Since then it's grown. So I remember feeling kind of defeated and upset that if I left town, I wasn't able to go worship. In the meantime, I had everybody still coming to my house because I was trying to be really open. A few months later, I was mowing the lawn for these two women that lived together, Kathleen and Frances. And Kathleen came out and she said, hey, Joni, we're going to go to church. Would you like to go with us? And I remember thinking, oh, no, I've had enough of church. And so I was mowing the lawn, and I said, no, but thanks, I'll catch up with y'all later. And Kathleen, I heard this voice say, you said that you'd do anything. And I remember mowing, and I stopped the lawnmower, and I looked around, I looked up, and I'm thinking, like, who said that? And I was like, okay, well, I did say I would be open. So I went back in the house, or I went into the house, and I said to Kathleen, what church are you going to, Kathleen? And she said, oh, today we're going to a Catholic church. And she said that because she was Christian, but Frances was Catholic, and so they would take turns going to each other's church. So today was Catholic Day. And I said, well, I'll be honest with you. I said, I would like to go to the Catholic Church. I've always been very intrigued with and attracted to the Catholic Church, but I don't understand what they do. Sit down, kneel down, stand up, and everybody's chanting something, and I don't understand what they're saying. And I was really discouraged the last time I went, and so I don't think I want to go. And she said, well, why don't you just come along, and Francine will help you out. She'll talk to you and tell you all about it. I said, well, okay. So I went to church with them that day, and we sat in the very front row, and Frances started telling me all about why we're sitting down, why we're kneeling down, about the Eucharist, and she just started to explain it all to me. And so then I was really interested. And so I started going with her more and more to the Catholic Church. A few months later, there was something in the bulletin called Why Catholic? Like, why would you pick the Catholic Church? And it was with a deacon that was offering the class. So I decided to take the class because at the time I was still having these Mormons and these Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was still going to Bay Area Fellowship. And so why would I pick the Catholic Church? And so I took that class. And I was really amazed to find out how old the Catholic Church was. and the traditions of the Catholic Church, the foundation, where it started and how it's continued over the years. And I was especially excited about the fact that there's a Catholic Church all over the world, and that on any given day you could go to any church and everyone is worshiping the same gospel or the same reading, and so that was really interesting to me, that I wouldn't just be praying alone, and that it didn't matter where I went, that I would always be able to find a Catholic church, and I wouldn't miss out on what happened last week because I was unable to go. And then being a coach, foundation and tradition is so important, and so it just kind of fit. And the more I learned about God and Jesus and the Gospels, the more I wanted to kind of give my life over. And it was during that time that hole in me, and I didn't even realize that it was happening, but that hole slowly began to be filled. And although I was still buying things, because I remember, I took the class, and that was really neat and interesting, and I loved it. And so I kind of eventually, the Mormons, it was already their 2 years were up, so they went home. And then something happened it wasn't like I disinvited them, it was just like the time had ended, and so they had moved on. And so then I was left here with the Catholic Church. And then there was another bulletin on another Sunday that I went to church, and it said, if you're interested in RCIA, contact Sister Barbara Blunzer, Sister of Providence. And so I asked about RCIA. I remember I called Sister Barbara and made an appointment to come in to see her. And I met her, and just this pillar of a woman, but she's so tiny and kind and gentle. And we talked, and I remember she said, so you're interested in becoming Catholic? And I said, yes. And she said, well, did you have something, are you going through a divorce? And I said, no. Did somebody recently die? No. Did you lose your job? I was like, well, is that a criteria for entering the Catholic Church? Like something terrible has to happen to me? And she said, well, no. She said, but most people that are your age, it's usually something horrible has happened, and so it's bringing them back to the church. And so she was just wondering if that was my case. And I said, well, no, actually things are really good. I own a house and a car, and I'm in the process of maybe buying a Tioga RV so that I could travel the country with my mother. I have a nice job. So yeah, things are actually pretty good, except there's this hole and I can't seem to fill it with anything. And a friend of mine suggested that it might be God. And so I'm just kind of checking it out. And so I decided to take the class, and so I started the RCIA program, and it was okay. I was learning a lot, but then there was those moments where somebody that was the speaker would say something that I really did not agree with, and I'm thinking, I can't believe he just said that, and he's part of the church. Like, how could he say that? Like, I thought the Jesus that I'm learning about is about inclusivity, and this person is not. And so one time I got up and I walked out of the class, and Sister Barbara followed me, and I was getting in my car, and she said, well, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm leaving. I said, I don't think this is for me. I said, first of all, I don't believe what that guy is saying, and I can't believe that you would have him come talk to people that are looking to be Catholic, because it's because of people like that people like me don't come, And she explained to me that your faith journey, your journey to get to know God and to have a relationship with God, shouldn't depend on what somebody says or what somebody does, and how in the church there's people on every spectrum. Like, there's people that are very devout, and there's people that are like holiday churchgoers, and everything in between. And she said, you find people that are of the same mindset and the same belief system, and then you walk that journey with them. And she said, and along the way, things might change. Like you may believe more this way or more that way. She said, but you allow that to unfold. Like you don't just throw in the towel because somebody said something that you didn't agree with. And so being a coach, I'm not a quitter. So it made sense to me. And I certainly didn't want that person to affect the relationship that I was trying to build with God. And so I kept coming back. And then eventually I became Catholic and was continuing going to church. I became a Eucharistic minister, and I was still coaching and teaching. And then I remember I went up to Sister Barbara again. I was like, you know, like I've done all this, but there's still something missing. Like that hole is filled, but there's still like, it's not all the way filled. Like there's still something missing. And I'm not really sure what it is. I can't put my finger on it. And she said, well, why don't you come back next week and I'm going to have something for you. I was like, okay. So I left, did my teaching, coaching, and came back the following Sunday, and she had this flyer for me, and it was something called a Come and See. And I remember reading it and saying, is this for people that want to be sisters? And she's like, well, kind of, but not, you know, you could just come and see how, you know, we live and check this out, and you don't have to become a sister, and but just check it out. And I remember being really intrigued, but kind of thinking like, oh, there's no way that they would take me. Like if they knew what I've done and the way that I've been living my life, like there's absolutely no way they're gonna throw me out as soon as I get there. And so I didn't tell anybody that I had said I was gonna go, although I had to talk to my mom. And I said, well, you know, Sister Barbara's older and she just wants a companion. And so I'm going to companion her to Saint Mary-of-the-Woods. And so that was my excuse for coming to the Come and See. And so I got here and I was around all these women that were interested in social justice issues. And they were talking about mercy and justice. And I knew about mercy, but not so much about justice and obviously love. And so I was kind of a little intrigued, but then kind of standoffish, just kind of from the outside looking in. And we spent the weekend here, then I went home. And I remember there was something that spoke to me, but I was too, I don't know what the word is, to admit it to myself or to let alone to anybody else. So I kept coming back. I came back for annual meetings. I came back just to come back. And after about like 4 or 5 come and sees, I remember Sister Patty Wallace asked me, she said, well, how long have you wanted to be a sister? And I was like, I don't want to be a sister. I just come hang out with y'all because y'all are cool. And then I started to learn about Mother Theodore and her struggles of coming to America all the way from France and being in a country where she didn't even speak the language, and her struggles with the bishop. And I was just intrigued by this woman who was filled with strength and courage and perseverance, and I was very attracted to her. And so I kept coming back. And then I remember I was at Owens and I thought, I was like in my 40s, 41, and I think the cutoff for the Sisters of Providence is 42. And so I thought to myself, well, I could just keep coming back to visit for the rest of my life, or I can give this sister thing a opportunity or a chance. And if I don't do it and I turn 42 or 43, then I might regret that I never did it. But at home, there was still this Tioga RV that I wanted to buy and travel the world with my mother. And so I remember I said to Mom, well, I'm going to give this a try. And if I don't like it, then I'll come back and buy the Tioga. But if I like it, then I don't know what we're going to do. And so I called Jenny Howard and I asked her to start the official process. And I remember being First of all, I went for a long drive because I didn't, still wasn't really sure that I wanted to call Jenny. And so I was driving, singing, crying, yelling. And I remember I pulled over, and it was like I ended up in this place that was just like really the desert. There was nothing out there. It was a dirt road, graveled road. And I remember I got out and I was like, "Are you sure, God? Are you sure this is what I'm supposed to do?" I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do it." And so I got my cell phone and I started to dial Jenny's number, and there was no service out there. So I was like, yes! So to me, it was a sign that I was not supposed to enter the Sisters of Providence, and I should stay home and buy the Tioga and travel with Mom. So I was like, okay. So I got in my car and I came home, and I was at home, and I decided I was going to go outside and pull some weeds. And so I started pulling these weeds out of my front yard, and in one of the weeds that I pulled up, this little coin came out. I should have brought it. Popped out, and I remember I picked it up and I looked at it, and I washed it off because it was full of mud. And I took it in and I looked it up. It was San Martin de Porres, and I didn't recognize him. I didn't even know who he was. He's a saint. And when I looked up what he is the patron saint of, it said the patron saint of interracial marriages. And I was like, oh my gosh. So going to the Sisters of Providence would be like an interracial marriage in many ways. One, I was Hispanic and the sisters are not. Two, I would be going to the Midwest and I'm from the South. And then there was also the age gap. And so then I remember I called Jenny that afternoon. By then I had service on my phone, and I said to her that would it be okay if I started the official process? And then she was really funny. She's like, well, are you sure? Maybe you should wait a little longer. I'm like, look, we're gonna do this now or it's never gonna happen. She's like, okay, well, I just wanna make sure you're ready. So we started the official process.